People laughed when a black waiter rushed to help a trembling old man who couldn't even hear his own cries, but when that waiter began speaking through his hands, in a language only silence understands, the entire restaurant froze. No one knew the man he saved was the deaf father of a billionaire. And no one expected what would happen next, when the billionaire arrived, and learned the truth. Speech balloon. Before we begin. If stories about human kindness, miracles, and unexpected heroes touch your heart, then please, like this video right now and subscribe to Gentle Words, for more true and emotional stories that remind us what being human really means. The lunch rush at L'Amour, a high-end restaurant tucked in the heart of New York, was always chaos wrapped in perfection. The waiters glided like dancers, each movement rehearsed, each smile polished. Silver cutlery shimmered under the golden lights, and expensive perfumes hung thick in the air. It was the kind of place where people didn't just eat, they displayed their power. But among the white uniforms and polished accents, there was Jamal. A black waiter, tall, quiet, with eyes that carried stories most people never asked to hear. To many of the rich guests, he was invisible. Just another shadow serving food and collecting plates. But inside that calm silence, Jamal carried something extraordinary, a past no one knew, a gift no one had seen yet. That afternoon, a new face entered the restaurant, an elderly man with trembling hands and kind eyes. He wore an old brown coat, a bit torn at the sleeves, and his hearing aid glinted faintly under the chandelier. He moved slowly, confused, as if the world around him was louder than he could bear. "Sir, may I help you?" the hostess asked politely. The old man didn't respond. His eyes darted around nervously. He tried to speak, but his words came out broken, scattered sounds instead of sentences. People started to glance over, whispering. A group of businessmen smirked from a corner table. "Looks like someone's lost," one of them chuckled quietly. The hostess frowned. "Sir, please." But before she could finish, the man stumbled forward, accidentally knocking over a tray of glasses. They crashed to the floor, splintering into 1,000 pieces. A gasp rippled through the restaurant. Managers came running. The sound of broken glass seemed to echo forever. "Sir, please calm down," one of them snapped. "You're disturbing our guests." The old man tried to speak again, tears welling in his eyes. He couldn't hear their voices, couldn't understand their anger. To him, it was all noise and confusion. And then, Jamal appeared. He had been serving water at the far end when he noticed the panic. Without hesitation, he placed his tray down and hurried toward the man. Hey, Jamal whispered softly, touching the man's shoulder. "It's okay. You're safe." The manager frowned. "Jamal, step aside. He's causing a scene." But Jamal didn't move. Instead, he crouched down, eye level with the frightened man, and then, he lifted his hands. And started speaking. Not with words, but with his fingers, his palms, his eyes. Sign language. Smooth. Graceful. Like music in motion. The old man's tearful eyes widened. His trembling stopped. He watched Jamal's hands, his breathing steadying as recognition filled his face. Then, slowly, his own hands began to move too, shaky, but sure. They spoke to each other, in silence. For the first time that day, the old man smiled. A small, fragile smile, like sunlight after rain. The restaurant fell into complete stillness. Forks stopped midair. Conversations froze. The same people who had been laughing now watched in awe as the two men, one rich in heart, one broken by sound, communicated with such grace that words seemed unnecessary. Jamal's lips curved as he signed gently. "Are you okay?" The old man nodded, then signed back. "I'm lost. My son told me to wait here. But I couldn't hear the waiter." Jamal nodded with understanding. "It's okay, sir. You're safe. I'll help you." The man's eyes glistened again, but this time, with gratitude. The manager, embarrassed, stepped forward. "Jamal, what's going on?" Jamal stood slowly, his gaze calm but firm. "He's deaf," he said softly. "He wasn't trying to cause trouble. He just got scared." The manager hesitated. "Still, you should have." But before he could finish, a deep voice boomed from the doorway. "Where is he? My father, where is my father?" Everyone turned. A tall, sharply dressed man entered, eyes burning with panic. His watch gleamed like it cost more than the restaurant itself. His aura screamed power. This was Ethan Carter, CEO of Carter Holdings, one of the youngest billionaires in the city. The old man looked up at the voice. His lips moved softly. Ethan. Ethan rushed forward, wrapping his arms around him. Dad, you scared me half to death. I told you to wait at home, why did you come alone? The old man tried to answer, his hands trembling as he made signs, but Ethan frowned, not understanding. Dad, please, I can't. Then Jamal stepped closer. Sir, he said gently, he's saying he wanted to surprise you. He came here because this is your favorite restaurant. But he got lost and frightened when people started shouting. Ethan blinked in confusion. You understand him? Yes, sir. I learned sign language years ago. Ethan looked at him with something between awe and guilt. I never learned it. My dad tried to teach me when I was young, but I was too busy building my company. I thought money could buy him everything. But not this. His voice cracked. Jamal looked at the old man again, who signed something softly. His hands were slow but full of meaning. Jamal translated quietly, he says he's proud of you. Even though you don't understand his silence, he always hears your heart. Ethan's eyes filled instantly. He dropped to his knees beside his father, gripping his hand tightly. Dad. The restaurant was silent again, not out of discomfort but respect. A woman at the next table wiped her tears. The businessmen who had laughed earlier now looked down, ashamed. Jamal quietly stepped back, wanting to give them space, but Ethan looked up. Wait. He stood, turning to Jamal. What's your name? Jamal, sir. Ethan nodded slowly, emotion thick in his voice. Jamal, you just gave me something no amount of money ever could. Jamal smiled humbly. Sometimes, sir, the richest people are the ones who can hear what others can't say. Ethan took a deep breath, then whispered, would you stay? Have lunch with us? My father would love that. Jamal hesitated, glancing at his manager, who suddenly looked very small. But before the manager could object, Ethan raised a hand. It's an order, from the owner of this restaurant chain. Everyone gasped. The whispers began again, but this time, in admiration. Ethan pulled out a chair. The old man smiled warmly, gesturing for Jamal to sit. Jamal obeyed, unsure but honored. As they ate, Ethan couldn't take his eyes off how his father and Jamal talked. Their hands moving like poetry, laughter silent yet louder than any sound. When the meal ended, Ethan leaned back and said softly, Jamal, what you did today, it's beyond kindness. You gave my father his voice back. Jamal shook his head gently. No, sir. He never lost it. The world just stopped listening. That line struck everyone at the table. Ethan smiled, his eyes misty. You're right. He turned to his father and signed, clumsy. Broken, but heartfelt, I love you. The old man froze, then smiled through his tears, replying with the same signs, I love you too, son. The entire restaurant clapped. For once, the sound wasn't just noise. It was respect. It was love made audible. Jamal lowered his gaze, humbled. He had simply done what was right, but in doing so, he had changed two lives forever. Ethan stood and faced the crowd. You all saw what kindness looks like. Remember his face, because heroes don't always wear suits or own empires. Sometimes, they wear aprons, and speak through silence. He turned back to Jamal. From today, you're not just a waiter. You're joining my company, as our official inclusion consultant, and friend. The crowd erupted in applause. Jamal could only smile, tears brimming in his eyes. In that golden light, as the father and son embraced again, Jamal realized something, that sometimes, the most powerful language in the world doesn't need words at all. The next morning came quietly, soft sunlight slipping through the curtains of Jamal's tiny apartment. The city outside was waking up, horns, footsteps, voices, but inside his heart there was a stillness he hadn't felt in years. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the small envelope in his hands. It was embossed with gold letters that read, Carter Holdings. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter signed by Ethan Carter himself, offering him a full-time position as inclusion consultant. A position that didn't just mean a better life, it meant a new purpose. Jamal sat for a long time, the letter trembling between his fingers. He had spent years serving people who never saw him, and now someone had seen not just his service but his soul. By noon, a black car waited outside his building. The driver opened the door with a small bow. Mr. Jamal, sir, Mr. Carter is expecting you. The words, Mr. Jamal, felt strange in his ears. For a second, he almost looked behind him, as if the title belonged to someone else. But it didn't. Not today. The car glided through the city streets, past the noise, past the tall glass buildings that once seemed unreachable. When it stopped, Jamal stepped out and stared up. His reflection shimmered across 50 floors of glass. Carter Holdings Tower. Inside, people moved with efficiency, phones in hand, eyes on screens. But when Jamal entered, the receptionist stood quickly and smiled. Good afternoon, Mr. Jamal. Mr. Carter is waiting upstairs. He followed her to the elevator. As the doors closed, he saw his reflection again, not as a waiter, but as a man who had finally been heard. When the elevator opened, Ethan Carter was waiting, his usual corporate confidence replaced by something warmer. Beside him sat his father, the man whose trembling hands had changed everything. Ethan smiled. Jamal, my friend, welcome to your new home. The old man beamed, raising his hands to sign slowly. You brought light into our silence. Jamal smiled back, responding in the same language, and you reminded me that silence can shine. Ethan watched them, his eyes soft. I still can't understand all that, he said with a chuckle, but I'm learning. He lifted his hands clumsily and signed, thank you. Jamal nodded proudly. That's perfect. Ethan led him to a glass office overlooking the city. This is where it begins, he said. I want to start a new division, a program that helps people with disabilities find real work opportunities. We'll train companies to hire, not out of pity, but out of respect. You'll lead it. Jamal blinked, stunned. Ethan, I don't even have a degree. Ethan smiled gently. Maybe not on paper. But you have something rarer, empathy. You understand what it means to listen without sound. That's what we need. The words struck something deep inside Jamal. For years, he had thought of his silence as a shadow, something that kept him unseen. But now, it was the very thing that made him special. He looked out at the skyline, thousands of windows reflecting light. And for the first time in a long time, he whispered, yes. I'll do it. Ethan's father signed, you'll change lives, Jamal. I can see it. Jamal nodded, but deep inside, a quiet ache returned, the kind that time never heals. That night, when he returned home, he took out an old photo from his drawer. A little girl smiled up from it, eyes full of light, hands frozen mid-sign. Maya, his younger sister. The one he'd loved more than anything. The one he couldn't save. The memory hit him like a wave. The smell of smoke. The screaming sirens. The image of her trapped behind a window, signing with trembling fingers, I love you, before the flames took her away. He had carried that image his whole life. That's why he'd learned sign language so perfectly. That's why he had never walked away when others needed help. That's why he couldn't ignore Ethan's father. He closed his eyes, whispering, I did it, Maya. I helped someone this time. The next few months passed like a dream. Jamal's program, the Carter Inclusion Initiative, grew faster than anyone imagined. He worked tirelessly, teaching staff basic sign language, organizing workshops, visiting community centers. Every time he saw a deaf child smile as they signed their name proudly, he felt Maya's laughter echoing in his heart. Ethan became not just his boss, but his friend. Often, they'd sit late in the office, sharing coffee and memories. Ethan confessed that growing up rich hadn't meant growing up happy. His father's silence had always felt like a wall. But you, Ethan said once, you tore that wall down. Jamal smiled. Maybe your father and I both needed someone to listen. One evening, Ethan entered Jamal's office, holding 2 tuxedos. We're hosting a gala, he said. For the Inclusion Foundation. And you, my friend, are the guest of honor. Jamal laughed nervously. Guest of honor. Ethan, I'm just. Ethan interrupted, smiling. You're the reason this exists. That night, under golden lights and chandeliers, hundreds of people gathered in the grand ballroom. There were business leaders, activists, families, and most importantly, dozens of deaf and differently abled guests, dressed in elegance and pride. As music played softly, Ethan walked onto the stage with his father beside him. He began to speak, his voice steady but emotional. Tonight, we're not just celebrating success, we're celebrating understanding. And one man reminded me that true strength lies not in wealth, but in compassion. He turned toward Jamal. Please welcome the man who showed us how silence can speak, Mr. Jamal Carter. Applause thundered through the hall. Jamal walked up slowly, his heart pounding. He had faced many rooms in his life, some full of noise, some full of silence, but never one like this. He took the microphone, his voice shaking. I never thought I'd stand in a place like this, he began. For a long time, I believed silence was my punishment. I lost my little sister when I was younger. She was deaf. Her name was Maya. The room fell utterly still. She used to tell me, Jamal continued, tears glistening in his eyes, that silence wasn't empty, it was full of stories. But after she died, I couldn't bear it anymore. I stopped listening. I stopped believing. Until the day I met a man who couldn't hear but had the loudest heart I'd ever known. He looked toward Ethan's father. That day, when I used sign language for the first time in years, I felt Maya again. I felt her love. And I realized something: the people we lose don't disappear. They live in every act of kindness we give. The audience sat frozen, many wiping tears. Maya used to sign something to me every morning, Jamal said softly. She'd say, kindness doesn't need sound. It just needs hands and heart. He lifted his hands and signed the words slowly, beautifully. One by one, the deaf guests began to sign the same phrase. Then others joined, imitating the movements, until the entire hall was filled with hundreds of hands moving in silent unity. No applause. No noise. Just silence, powerful, alive, full of meaning. Jamal's tears fell freely now. Ethan's father stood and walked toward him, taking his hands gently. He signed, Maya would be proud of you. Jamal gasped softly. How do you know her name? The old man smiled. Ethan told me your story. I wanted to learn her name. Because she's part of ours now. Jamal pressed a hand over his heart, unable to speak. Ethan stepped forward, his voice breaking. You changed our family, Jamal. You gave me my father back. You gave us all something priceless, understanding. He turned to the crowd. From today onward, the foundation will bear her name. The Maya Inclusion Initiative. A wave of emotion rippled through the hall. Jamal covered his mouth, sobbing softly. The room erupted in applause, thunderous, endless applause that felt like heaven breaking open. Ethan's father reached into his pocket and handed Jamal a small silver pendant. When Jamal opened it, he saw an engraving inside. The heart hears what the ears cannot. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, he whispered. The old man smiled. No, thank you. When the gala ended, Jamal walked outside into the cool night air. The city lights shimmered on the river like floating stars. He lifted his eyes to the sky, the silver pendant resting against his chest. He whispered softly, Maya, we did it. And for a moment, as the breeze brushed against his face, he felt something, a warmth, a familiar comfort. The air around him seemed to hum with invisible hands signing back, I know. He smiled through his tears, standing quietly beneath the stars. The city roared behind him, alive with sound, but within him, there was peace. Silence wasn't his curse anymore. It was his language, his strength, his song. And from that night on, wherever Jamal went, whether in boardrooms, schools, or quiet cafes, people didn't just hear his words. They felt them. Because when kindness speaks, it doesn't need volume. It only needs a heart willing to listen.